Hello and welcome to my review of the fourth episode of Game of Thrones Season 8, which was called The Last of the Starks. So if you watched my previous video, then you'll know that I was not a big fan of the last episode, and I voiced my concerns about the overall quality of this final season. I was hoping the following episode would quell my fears, but I have to be honest, it's only made them worse. The episode was stuffed full of plot holes, though there were some scenes I did enjoy. So without further ado, let's dive into Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 4, The Last of the Starks. I actually really liked the opening scene of this episode. I voiced concerns in my last video that I was worried that the show wouldn't address the sheer number of people who have died in the long night, and that Dany and Jon would still be shown to have a huge army capable of fighting Cersei. However, this episode opened by showing the vast number of warriors who fell to the dead, and the loss that the North is feeling. It felt like most of the major characters remaining have lost someone precious to them. Jon and Sam lost Ed, Dany lost Jorah, and Sansa lost Theon. I thought the acting here was really on point, and I really bought the pain these characters were feeling. Emilia Clarke did a great job at expressing the anguish Dany feels over losing Jorah. He's been a character she's looked to for guidance for years, but now she's lost him for good, at a time when she needs him the most. She whispers something in his ear that the audience doesn't get to hear, and I quite like that. I doubt it will be anything important later on, but I thought it was a nice intimate moment for the characters. Sansa gives Theon a hairpin in the shape of a direwolf, but I thought that was a lovely way of highlighting his special status as both a Stark and a Greyjoy. As I said, I really felt the loss here. We may have won the battle, but not without some serious sacrifice. The bodies are burned on pyres, which makes sense because imagine how long it would take to dig all those graves, and Jon gives an excellent speech about how these people are true heroes who gave their lives guarding the realms of men. He states they will never be forgotten, and I have to admit, this scene got me right in the feels. Kit Harington did a great job in delivering these lines, and I really felt the emotion in his voice. A really excellent scene. Some people have wondered why the dead were burned in their armour, and have also said the number of bodies seemed to be fewer than the death toll shown during the battle. I feel both these criticisms can be explained. Firstly, while it might make sense to salvage the armour of the fallen, it's not very respectful. Burying or burning a warrior in his armour was often seen as a mark of respect in our own history, and it makes sense that the living would want to honour these dead as best they can. Essentially looting their corpses for armour is pretty disrespectful, and I can see that neither Dany nor Jon would consider the idea. Besides, there's no reason to believe Dany still isn't flush with cash from her conquests overseas, so I don't see why she wouldn't be able to keep the army stocked up. As for the lack of corpses versus the sheer amount we saw die in battle, I think that's really more to do with the constraints of filming rather than an error in the continuity, and I can forgive that. Besides, who's to say that the friends and family of some of the other fallen warriors didn't instead choose to have them buried or burned elsewhere? That evening the survivors have a feast to celebrate their victory in the memory of their loved ones. Again, I think this was generally a pretty effective scene. On the one hand, these people have suffered terrible loss, but on the other, I can't imagine how elated they must be to have beaten the Night King and survived. The Hound busts Gendry's balls over being infatuated with Arya, but then lays off and tells him it's right that he should be. There's a time for mourning and a time for living. I love how the Hound is like this curmudgeonly old uncle giving the young folk advice. Dany then speaks to Gendry, and at first I thought she was going to go on a rant about how his dad destroyed her family, but instead she makes him the new Lord of Storm's End. I'm kind of conflicted about this. On the one hand, it's cool to see Gendry become legitimised and carry on the Baratheon name. It was nice to see Dany be cool to Gendry, and Tyrion was right when he said she'd made a lord who will be loyal to her for life. However, on the other hand, she has just legitimised the only person left in Westeros who could challenge her for the throne other than Cersei. Gendry is Robert Baratheon's bastard, and it's not impossible to imagine that the Northern Lords, who already dislike Dany, may be tempted to put Gendry on the throne rather than her. As viewers, we know Gendry doesn't want the throne, but Dany can't know that. To her, Gendry could be someone who might seize the opportunity and try to take power from her. I honestly can't tell if this was a dangerous but smart move on Dany's part, as it does make her look good to the other lords by raising up one of their own, or if it was poor writing. If it was to curry favour with the other lords, Sansa certainly didn't seem impressed, though the other lords seem happy enough. I wonder if the writers considered all this when the scene was written, or if they just included it because Storm's End is empty and they wanted something to do with Gendry. My cynicism, unfortunately, tells me it may well be the latter. The festivities continue, and we get to see some really nice scenes of characters finally getting to let their hair down, as well as some other characters pondering what the future holds. We have a scene with Tyrion and Davos where the two contemplate the fact that they're back into playing the Game of Thrones once again. In a way, that's even worse than fighting the Night King. We also see the Lannister boys enjoying a drink together with Brienne and Podrick. If there's one thing I have liked about this season, it is the fact that we've had scenes where characters have been able to enjoy one another's company for a bit. They're playing the drinking game that Bronn, Tyrion and Shae played in Season 1. We then get the reunion I've been waiting for some time, the Hound meeting Sansa again. At first the Hound tries to bat Sansa away, but she shows him how much he's changed since they last met. I like how the Hound says that all the horrible stuff that happened to Sansa wouldn't have happened had she come with him in Season 2, and I like how you can tell he's thought about that a lot over the years. Sansa tells him she's glad she didn't, because otherwise she wouldn't be the person she is today. I get what she's saying, she certainly learned a lot from Cersei and Littlefinger, but I think she shouldn't have said Ramsay. That guy was just a fucking psycho, and I can't imagine anyone being glad to have gone through the things Sansa went through with him. I mean, come on, he tortured and raped her. It's interesting how both Sansa and Arya used to think the Hound was one of the meanest people in Westeros, but now they both realise he's really not that bad. Tormund starts making some toasts and makes one to Dany and her dragons. Dany reciprocates by toasting Arya. However, the mood changes once Tormund toasts Jon and starts pointing out what a great leader he is. Dany begins to realise just how beloved Jon is by the North and how few people support her in Westeros. It cements her fears that, if people were to know that Jon really was a Targaryen, the people would rather see him on the throne than her. Gendry catches up with Arya and, after telling her he's the new Lord of Storm's End, he asks Arya to be his wife. Arya, though she clearly cares for Gendry, refuses his offer and says that that's not her, a lie she said to her father when he told her she'd be a lady. I like that the writers have been consistent with Arya's character, but I don't understand why they had Gendry take a knee when he proposed to Arya. This is something we do in our own society, but it's not something I've ever heard done in Westeros, so I have no idea why Gendry did it. I generally liked this scene and thought Joe Dempsey and Maisie Williams did a great job acting it, but the little details like taking a knee keep marring perfectly good scenes like this. Back at the party, Jaime, Brienne, Pod and Tyrion are still playing their drinking game when Tyrion correctly guesses Brienne is a virgin, much to Brienne's embarrassment. Now, when you judge this scene by real-life standards, you can understand that a woman of Brienne's age might feel awkward about being a virgin. However, this scene really didn't make sense by the standards of medieval society. Brienne is an unmarried noblewoman, and in medieval society, noble women weren't expected to have sex until their wedding night. Not only should it be obvious to everyone that, as an unmarried noblewoman, Brienne would be a virgin, she should also have no reason to be ashamed of that. In fact, she should be proud of it. Again, another scene marred by lazy writing. By the way, something I did notice while making this video, in the scene where Sansa and the Hound talk, you can see Podrick in the background with two women on his arm. Only just caught that. Nice going, Pod. Brienne leaves the party in embarrassment and Jaime follows her back to her room. It's not long before things become intimate and Jaime and Brienne finally do the deed. Personally, I neither hated nor loved this scene. On the one hand, Jaime and Brienne clearly care a great deal about one another, and there have been sparks of romantic feelings for years, so I can buy that they do have sex. However, I can also see why some people preferred their relationship to be more platonic and one of mutual admiration. One criticism I've heard of the scene was that the way Jaime tried to seduce Brienne was like something out of a poorly written porn film. He comes in, complains about the heat, and starts taking his clothes off. Now, I do agree that Jaime's game is terrible here, but I actually think it makes perfect sense for him to be terrible at being romantic towards women. As a young man, he was Jaime fucking Lannister. He was handsome and rich and from a powerful family. As Bronn said in a previous season, he doesn't need to seduce women, they come to him for his looks, wealth and status. He also never cared about any woman other than Cersei, and she instigated their relationship, so it's not like he had to try and seduce her. I can totally buy the idea that when it comes to romance, Jaime is pretty clueless. It was nice to see Brienne get to embrace her feminine side and feel what it's like to be wanted physically after years of being bullied for her looks. We cut to a scene where it looks like Jon and Dany are about to get freaky, but they both realise things have changed since they discovered they're related. Dany begs Jon not to reveal his true parentage, but he insists he can't keep this secret from Arya and Sansa. Jon says he has no intention of taking the Iron Throne, but Dany correctly points out that it won't be up to him. When you think about it, Jon hasn't wanted any of the big things that have happened to him. He didn't want to be Lord Commander, and he didn't want to be King of the North, and he doesn't want to be King of the Seven Kingdoms. The first two were thrust upon him, and the third may well be also. Dany begs Jon to keep the secret and marry her so they can rule together, but this has its own problems. Westeros is a patriarchal society, so even if both Dany and Jon rule, many of the lords will look to Jon for leadership rather than Dany. In the war room, Dany is eager to attack Cersei as soon as possible, but for some reason comes up with an absolutely terrible and overly complicated plan. She wants to split the forces up, transport her army by sea while Jon's goes by land. That makes no sense, as they know Euron and his fleet outnumber them and patrol the seas around King's Landing. It's a terrible plan, but it's the one they go with because, as David Benioff, one of the lead writers, says,
and he kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet.
No guys, I think you forgot about the Iron Fleet. I honestly don't understand why they don't just send Arya to kill Cersei. I know that sounds a bit much at first, but hear me out. Arya can shapeshift so no one would know it was her, and she could easily take the guise of one of Cersei's handmaids to get close to her. Cersei drinks like a fish, so poisoning her would be easy. As if the ability to shapeshift wasn't enough, Varys, Tyrion and Jaime all know about the secret tunnels that lead directly to the rooms of important people like Cersei. She could slip in and out without even having to worry about the guards. Seriously, I can't understand why anyone hasn't brought this up yet. Why can't Arya do to Cersei what she did to the Freys? The meeting adjourns with Dany's terrible plan in place, and Sansa and Arya tell Jon they need a word about Dany. The two tell Jon they don't trust Dany, but as Jon points out, they wouldn't be alive were it not for her, and they owe her. Sansa and Arya point out that they're the last of the Starks, they need to stick together. This prompts Jon to reveal to them that he's really a Targaryen. I'm not really sure why Jon chose this moment to reveal the secret, given that it actually further damages Dany's claim to the throne and further cements Arya and Sansa's opposition to her. Jon points out that great houses need allies, and Arya says she doesn't need many allies, and my eyes almost rolled out my head. I hate it when the writers give Arya dumb lines that would be cringy in an 80s action flick, and it makes no practical sense. Arya is not a moron. She should understand that allies are important. In fact, in the last season, she smiles as Sansa says, "The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives." So why does she now no longer need allies? Besides, why would anyone listen to her? Not only is she not in line to be in charge of Winterfell, she also fucks off in the next scene. Why should Jon take any counsel from her? I really tried to see where the writers are coming from in scenes I don't like, but I've not heard any good defences of this one. This terrible scene is then followed by another that's somehow even worse. Tyrion and Jaime are sat drinking alone in a pub and are interrupted when, from out of nowhere, Bronn appears and says he'll kill them both if they don't offer him up a good enough reason not to. This scene doesn't make a lick of sense for so many reasons. Okay, so a lot of people have wondered how the hell Bronn was able to sneak into Winterfell, but this actually isn't a problem because the pub Tyrion and Jaime are drinking in isn't in Winterfell. It's in a small town near Winterfell called Wintertown. You can see the pub here with Winterfell in the background. So okay, Bronn didn't have to sneak into Winterfell while carrying a giant crossbow, but why doesn't the Hand of the Queen have an escort of guards wherever he goes? That would be like if the Vice President was going for a drink and he didn't have any bodyguards with him. Don't worry, we're just getting started here. So forget all the hints we've had that Bronn may finally be fighting for something more than himself. He literally just wants golden power. There's no character arc here. Cersei is going to give him River Run for killing Jaime and Tyrion, and Bronn wants to see if they can beat that offer. What's Bronn's endgame here? Let's say he kills Tyrion and Jaime. How likely is it that he'll ever get back to King's Landing alive with Dany's army after him? And how does he know that if he accepts an offer from the two Lannisters, they won't just call the guards as soon as he leaves? In fact, it would be treasonous for them not to. Bronn is an important person in Cersei's court, and he could provide information. Tyrion offers Bronn Highgarden, which is a promise he absolutely cannot deliver on, and Bronn should know this. Bronn can count on Cersei to give him River Run because she's the queen. Tyrion is only the Hand of the Queen, and I cannot imagine why Dany would ever agree to give such an important keep to a cutthroat who demanded it in exchange for not killing her hand. The moment Bronn leaves, the threat is over, so what incentive does anyone have to make good on the promise? I guess if Bronn agrees to be a spy and gives Dany information on Cersei's plans, she might reward him, but still not with Highgarden. This is the same guy who tried to kill her dragons. I also hate the moment where Bronn fires an arrow to show he's serious, and then has it reloaded in a second. We were told in Season 2 by Yoren that crossbows suck because they're so slow to load.
So be it. I always hated crossbows. Take too long to load!
This scene felt so rushed and I honestly couldn't stop laughing throughout it. It felt like a spoof or something. It reminded me of the episode of It's Always Sunny where Mac is playing both sides.
The reason I'm telling you all this is because I'm playing both sides so that I always come out on top. So, with this information, I'm going to leverage you guys into making me the head of security at the new Patty's Pub.
Okay. Couple things right off the bat there, pal. Number one, never tell one side that you're playing both sides.
Yeah.
And number two, if you are going to play both sides, don't give away the information before you get what you want.
Oh, shit.
We then see the Hound is leaving Winterfell and he's soon joined by Arya. The Hound says he's got some unfinished business down south, which I can only take to mean he intends to kill his brother, the Mountain. I'm not really sure why the Hound is choosing to do this on his own when he could go down with the rest of the army, but he's going anyway. Arya joins him and it looks like she's heading south to kill Cersei. Again, I don't know why she doesn't go with the rest of the army, but if it results in us getting some Arya and the Hound screen time, then I don't really mind. You'd think maybe Arya could tell Jon and Dany she'll go kill Cersei and save them the trouble of mobilising an entire army, but hey. I think it's quite likely the Hound will kill the Mountain, but I doubt Arya will kill Cersei, or at least I hope not. Arya killing her may make more sense than her killing the Night King, but I don't think the show will give her two big kills like that so close together. Besides, it's been heavily hinted at that Jaime will kill Cersei in the books, and I hope the same is true for the show. Back in Winterfell, Tyrion and Sansa talk to Dany. Sansa tells Tyrion within moments that Jon is a Targaryen, and now the secret is truly out. I think there's a good line where Sansa says that Tyrion is scared of Dany, which I think is true to an extent. Dany can be pretty rash when she's angry, though I don't see her as a mad monarch like her father. The army is preparing to leave, and we see a lot of goodbyes. Now that the threat of the White Walkers is over, the wildlings, including Tormund, are heading back to beyond what remains of the wall. It totally makes sense that the North doesn't care about who sits on the Iron Throne, so I've got no problem with the wildlings heading back home. I do wonder if we'll see Tormund again. This may have been his last scene. Given all he's been through, I'm amazed he survived. Must be that giant's milk he drank. Jon and Tormund say goodbye, and Jon asks Tormund to take Ghost with him. Now, this has outraged a lot of fans. First, Ghost was missing for several seasons, then we see him fight bravely in the Long Night, and now Jon can't even give him a pet as he leaves him. Are you kidding me, Jon? You'd be dead years ago were it not for Ghost. I understand that CGI budgets and the difficulty of filming the wolves makes Ghost a tough character to have on screen, but then I imagine the dragon scenes aren't easy either. I'd personally have happily sacrificed some dragon screen time if it meant Jon had given Ghost a proper goodbye. I really feel Jon should have been more emotional about leaving Ghost behind. They fought side by side for years, and now look how wounded Ghost is after the Long Night. Poor boy, at least we know Tormund will take good care of him. Again, this scene felt rushed to me. This scene also reveals that Sam has gotten Gilly pregnant, and if it's a boy, they say they're going to call him Jon, which is nice. Jon is heading south, but I'm not sure where Sam and Gilly are headed, if they're going anywhere at all. They may well stay in the north, but given that Sam is the only remaining heir to Hornhill, I guess he could return there and be the new lord once the war's over. On the ship to Dragonstone, Varys and Tyrion discuss the fact that Jon is a Targaryen. I have to imagine this was pretty big news to Varys. He's been trying to get a Targ on the throne since season 1, so it must come as a surprise to him that after years of keeping tabs on Dany and Viserys, Jon was in Westeros all this time. We watch as Dany's fleet draws closer to Dragonstone, and then we get some nice shots of her ships and her dragons flying. All of a sudden, several ballista bolts come out of nowhere and kill Rhaegal. I've got to admit I did not see this coming, but having recovered from the shock, this is yet another scene that doesn't really make much sense. So Dany and her ships are ambushed by Euron, but how did Dany not see Euron's ships when she's flying high in the sky? I can buy that the fleet may not see him, but how on earth did Dany not spot them? Also, this is slightly nitpicky, but the ballistas are incredibly accurate. Can you imagine how hard it would be to hit a moving target at that range whilst taking wind speed and bullet drop into account? And of course, it was Euron who fired the killing shot. Obviously, Dany goes mad, and it looks like she's about to burn the enemy fleet, but then she's forced to retreat. The crew of her ship have to make a dash for it. Most of them, including Grey Worm, appear to make it to the shores of Dragonstone, but somehow Missandei is captured. It's never explained how she's captured, especially when Grey Worm was last seen stood right next to her, and you'd think he'd have looked out for her, but stop asking questions and just accept the fact she's taken prisoner. We cut to King's Landing, where Cersei is allowing all the small folk to take refuge from the war in King's Landing. Of course, she's only doing this because she knows Dany will be hesitant to torture the city with Drogon if there are civilians inside. Honestly, I feel like Cersei is the only player who actually makes good tactical decisions these days. She congratulates Euron for killing Rhaegal and tells him their child will rule after them. I think I could see a slight baby bump on Cersei in this scene, so it looks like she really is pregnant, though the father is probably Jaime. I do wonder if Cersei did win the war, would she have Euron murdered? I'm sure he'd do the same to her. In Storm's End, Dany is eager to lay siege to King's Landing, but Varys doesn't want to see the small folk suffer for Daenerys' revenge. Don't get me wrong, I can see where Varys is coming from, but I don't see why he's now so concerned about civilians. He's been willing to do very shady stuff in the past for the greater good, but now he's clutching his pearls at the idea of Dany laying siege to King's Landing. Is it not better in the long run to just get rid of Cersei by any means and then rule peacefully? What Dany is proposing is no different to countless wars fought before, and I really don't buy the idea that she's becoming unhinged or a warmonger. She's called the Mother of Dragons. What did Varys think she'd do? We then have a scene where Tyrion and Varys openly discuss the idea that Dany may not be the right ruler for Westeros. Again, I really don't understand why these two suddenly have lost so much faith in Dany. They both knew she had a mean streak when they joined up with her, and she's still nowhere near Cersei or the Mad King levels of crazy or cruel. They basically lose faith in her because she was a bit of an outsider up north, and because she wants to fight Cersei. I really don't see why either of these things means she needs to be dethroned. They were fine with her when she was burning Dickon and his father alive, but now the idea of attacking King's Landing is too much. What did they think she was aiming to do? Honestly, I wouldn't call Dany wrong if she had both of them executed for treason. We seem to have conveniently forgotten that Varys originally wanted Viserys on the Iron Throne. You know, the actual crazy one who had no problem with slavery and was going to invade Westeros with Khal Drogo's Khalasar. The writers certainly forgot this. I can accept the idea that eventually Dany may start to become unhinged, but this feeling is so rushed I can't buy it at all. Back in Winterfell, Jaime hears the news that Euron has killed one of Dany's dragons and that Dany intends to attack Cersei. Despite his new relationship with Brienne, he decides instead to head back down south to Cersei. Now, when I first watched this scene, I got the impression that Jaime is heading south to try and convince Cersei to surrender or to stop her by force if necessary. I still don't think he considers himself to be redeemed, and my understanding of that scene was that he's going to stop further bloodshed or die trying. That's why he abandons Brienne, because he doesn't want her to risk dying as well. However, some fans think he's running back to Cersei because he's realised he loves her again. If this turns out to be true, then Jaime's arc will have been utterly ruined and the show will end a disgrace for me. I really hope I was right with my first assessment, but if Jaime does run back to Cersei's side, then I will lose any respect I had for the writing. Jaime did confess all his crimes to Brienne, which implies he still feels he needs to redeem himself, so I hope I'm right in my prediction. Please God let me be right. In the final scene of the episode, we see Dany's party outside King's Landing ready to parley with Cersei. So before we touch on what happens in the scene, am I the only one who thought the set looked really weird? It looked really hot. I thought winter was supposed to be here. Also, why did King's Landing look so different to the King's Landing we've seen in previous episodes? It all just looked really off to me. Tyrion meets with Qyburn and tries to find some common ground, but it soon becomes clear that that's not going to work. Tyrion addresses Cersei directly and urges her to surrender for her life of her child. Cersei refuses and instead has Missandei executed. I've always liked Missandei and Grey Worm as a couple, so I was really sad for Grey Worm as he looked away. We see Dany almost explode with rage, and it's quite clear that neither Varys nor Tyrion are going to be able to stop her from unleashing hell on Cersei, whatever the cost. I did wonder why Missandei didn't push Cersei off the wall when Cersei touched her. What has she got to lose at that point? I do have to wonder why Cersei didn't then order her archers and the ballista to fire on Dany and the others. They were near enough to hear Missandei say Dracarys, so they should be well within range. Cersei doesn't give a fuck about honour or respect, so I could really see her pulling a move like this. Maybe she feels very confident about winning and wants to make Dany suffer. Anyway, that's a wrap for this episode. Overall, I found it to be pretty disappointing, and the writing was worse than it's ever been in some places. There were some scenes I did like, but overall I thought it was pretty bad. So we've had 2 good episodes and 2 bad ones. Here's hoping the next 2 are good again. If ever a show deserved to end on a high note, it's Game of Thrones, but I'm becoming increasingly concerned it's going to end on a bum note. Till next time. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a comment, give it a like, and share it with your friends. That really helps my channel to grow. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe. I put out at least 1 video a week. See you next time.